If you just take event data, you get pass, shot, or duel, or whatever. Actually, if you're able to add the tracking data and you have the skill set to do that, you can add so much more context around what's the opposition doing and what pressures involved and what options were there. You can start to look at maybe a league benchmarking. You can then filter into, okay, what are some of those dominant teams within some of those leagues that actually express those attributes that we are really interested in our, centre forward profile. I think the emergence of that sort of coach analyst role has been really, really interesting. I think there was definitely, if I think back to when I was an analyst, there was definitely a divide. What we want to do is make sure that the timing of the actual input of the telestration and the delivery of that and the opportunity to get your coaching point across all kind of marries up. It taught me some different skills, first of all, and it also taught me that actually I felt like I didn't belong there. And we do that in an automated fashion. There's no one tagging anything, it's all automated, it's all modeled. And it's the same with the off-ball run. So we can detect and classify 10 different run types. We're able to onboard that, if we're able to track that and derive information, you've now got this consistent data set. So you can now actually have a view of, physically and technically and tactically, your players that are already in your system. I kind of still remember the feeling that I had going into the gaffer's office. It was Alex Neil at the time. We were sort of midway through in the Prem. And, I kind of felt like I was 4 feet tall, the pressure on my shoulders, I needed to sort of relieve that pressure. And I went in and I just said to the gaffer,
Hello and welcome back to the Chris Gill podcast, and today's guest is Craig Inness. So Craig is involved heavily within the tracking data aspect of football analytics. So the company that Craig works for has actually been mentioned a couple of times by previous guests that I've had on this podcast. So I thought it'd be a good idea to get Craig on and speak in a little more detail around how tracking data is used by professional clubs and federations, how that is used within recruitment specifically, but also then we talk about kind of classifying off the ball runs, we talk about pressure, and Craig also shares his screen within this conversation, shares a few slides and gives some real life examples. So it's really interesting to see the data and how it is actually used firsthand. So aside from the tracking data aspect of the conversation, we also speak about Craig's past as an analyst. So Craig started out being an actual analyst within clubs, and we speak about that, what Craig got up to then, but also then eventually leaving the industry to get to where he is today. So we speak about work-life balance and also the kind of changing role of the analyst, but also the kind of career pathway of an analyst too. So really interesting conversation. So before we get into it, I want to quickly ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and give the video a like if you do find value. So let's get into the conversation with Craig Inness. Craig, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Yeah, doing well, Chris. Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, no, looking forward to chatting. So there's a couple of reasons why I reached out to you initially to get you on. Obviously, the first one being tracking data, which we're going to get into. There's lots of things to talk around that. But then also, obviously, how you got to the role you're in now, which we will come to. But you were an analyst. You left the industry. You kind of, which we'll come on to, and obviously you found your way back into the industry, but in a different kind of role. So what I'll do first, Craig, I'm going to pass it over to you. Just give a quick intro, who you are for those that don't know, and what you're currently doing.
Yeah, sure. Thanks again, Chris. Really looking forward to this. I'm Craig Inness, currently working for SkillCorner as a business development manager, working across UK and North America. And held previous roles in a couple of other tech companies within sport and also as an analyst in a championship and Premier League clubs over the last sort of, I suppose that's a 10-year span.
Yeah, perfect. So a couple of previous podcast episodes, I will link them below, I've mentioned SkillCorner, which is one of the reasons why I reached out to you, obviously to learn more about it myself. So I think that was Tom Warville mentioned SkillCorner and the tracking data. I think Sarah Rudd may have mentioned it as well, and it's been talked about in the Sam Gregory one as well. So It's quite a hot topic that I want to learn more about myself. So like I say, bring the person on that's going to know a lot more about it than me. So perfectly. So okay, I just want to say actually before we start, so you mentioned the start of your career in terms of that analyst. I think although we've never actually met, Craig, we have kind of close link in the fact that I joined the club just after you left in Brighton. Yep. So we kind of close to meeting about 10 years ago, but obviously that didn't happen. And then a lot of kind of connections in common as well. So it's good to finally speak to you. So, okay. So what we'll do then is we'll start with just to kind of paint the picture in terms of getting into analysis first off, Craig. So were you kind of the conventional analyst route, uni, internship experience? Was that the way? And how did you first kind of, where did the interest come from to be an analyst basically? Did you play? Did you coach?
No, I didn't play apart from attempting to try and kick a ball around when you're younger, as most people do. Although I am from South Wales originally, you can probably tell a little bit by my accent. But in Wales, football obviously isn't a big sport, or wasn't back then. So we didn't have too many opportunities. But I definitely wasn't destined to be a footballer. Let's put it that way. but I did enjoy sport. I knew that I wanted to do sport in some way, shape, or form with science in university. So I did a sports science degree, as I think a lot of people probably on this path may have done as well, at the University of Exeter. And interestingly, there wasn't any specific module on performance analysis at the time. I think there was a pretty boring biomechanics module, which may be related slightly to this discipline. But so yeah, I didn't actually know coming out of university what I wanted to do really. I had an interest in sort of sport and anything to do with it, but I could have easily gone down maybe a sports science route or maybe performance analysis or maybe even coaching. And yeah, like most people after university, I ended up trying to apply for lots of different positions within sport, anything I can get my hands on, internships in particular. And I ended up with two opportunities in the south of Wales, which is obviously where I was based at the time. One at Swansea City, which was an internship for a performance analysis role. Mm-hmm. And the other one was with the Llanelli Scarlets, which is a regional rugby team, also in the south of Wales, but that was more on the sports science side. So I had a bit of a decision to make. Fortunate enough to have that decision to make, and I chose performance analysis. It sort of piqued my interest a little bit more. And if I'm being brutally honest, I thought there may be a little bit more longevity in that. Working in the Premier League and that sort of stuff was an attraction. So that was my way in. To Swansea as an intern in the first team, and there was two of us. There was two positions. There was two of us that started back in 2011, I think it was.
Long time ago.
Yeah.
So was Swansea in the Premiership then? The Premier League? They were, yeah.
Yeah, it was under Brendan Rodgers at the time in the Premier League. Yeah, so very, very fortunate. I guess if I was maybe a couple of seasons before, I would have been in the Championship. So yeah, very fortunate to have that Premier League season, that experience.
Was that your first experience? Because like from me, like my first experience in a club was Sheffield United, but like some people do stuff with like the uni team. So to go into the first club being like a Premier League team, that's quite a big step. Like how was that?
Well, if I'm being, it was my first experience, and to be honest with you, I think being in South Wales, there's obviously two clubs, Cardiff and Swansea in South Wales, probably. From an internship perspective, not loads of people who were maybe going for those roles. I'm maybe doing myself a disservice here, I don't know, but maybe that helped me because I was local. The internship was, I'll be brutally honest, it was unpaid. I think, that's probably the landscape around that has changed these days, but I wouldn't have it any other way, by the way. Swansea had me for the season, and it was, invaluable experience, but that was my first experience. So I think I was quite fortunate to be able to get straight into the deep end, to be honest with you, without having to go a different route, which might be more likely today.
Yeah. So what can you just give an overview of what you were doing then as the intern? Was it first team then, I presume?
It was first team. Yeah, there was two of us. There was myself and a guy called Scott Helmich, who you probably know, who works in the tech space now as well. And we were both sort of responsible for kind of pre and post match. Scott led a little bit more on the pre-match and opposition work, and I did more of the post-match and assisted on various different sort of details and obviously different aspects of, I think most people know what goes into the performance analysis roles at a first team level these days. So we work together very well, and we work with actually Chris Davis, who's obviously just been appointed at Birmingham. Worked with Brendan obviously for years, and obviously was just at Tottenham as an assistant manager or assistant coach. And actually Chris was probably one of those first coach stroke analysts that I'd come across, because he was definitely on the grass, but he was also very much working, down in the dungeons, as I call it, downstairs in the stadium in one of these rooms, analysing the games. Myself and Scott were feeding him with information to try and help, prepare for games. So it was kind of all encompassing really. And like I said, I led a bit more on the post match. So setting up the kind of the post match meetings, and I know this sounds as a small detail, but one of the big things I remember, we had a meeting room in. It was maybe a David Lloyd gym at the time, and that was where we trained, and we used to do the meetings in a spin classroom. So we'd have to pull all the spin bikes out, and I don't know if you've done that, but they're quite heavy. Pull all of those out, put the chairs in a really specific way, set the projector up, obviously do that sort of stuff, and help the feedback session. So yeah, it was interesting, very, very good experience under sort of Chris's guidance.
Yeah, so I want to ask you then, because you mentioned that it's unpaid. So you said as well that the landscape's changed a little bit. We are seeing kind of the masters that are paid for by the clubs, like paid internships more. So that one you said was totally unpaid, which is I did exactly the same, totally unpaid at Sheffield United. And then the one that you went to next was again the same one that I went to. It was a paid internship at Brighton. It felt unpaid because the rent was so expensive for me. Not from up north, it was a big shock for me. But, so just kind of talk a little bit around that kind of the what seems to be the need to do the unpaid work and how that is changing a little bit?
Yeah, I think honestly maybe the governance around unpaid internships has obviously potentially changed, and rightly so. There's so much value in people now, I guess, coming out of potentially education and universities with skill sets that can go into these roles, and I think it definitely warrants being sort of remunerated in some way, some form of payment for that. Whether you choose as an intern to then really kick on and really throw yourself into it or just do the bare minimum is up to you. But I think the landscape, it seems as though it has changed. Obviously, we're talking 10 years ago when I entered an internship, and there definitely wasn't that need to pay. So, of course, clubs trying to save resources where possible, and me, keen as mustard, I was more than happy to oblige 20 minutes down the road, so it wasn't a problem. But I definitely think today it is slightly different. That's certainly from clients and clubs that I work with. And also, working with, great universities that have these sort of, internships and MSc placements and stuff like that. I think it is great. And certainly the value from the club side is there. I don't think anybody would pay an intern if there wasn't value there. And I think there definitely is. That the stock, I suppose, is higher today, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it was because for me it was the first time I'd effectively moved away from home, and the money that the payment that I got would basically just pay my rent.
Yeah,
And
I
that
think I
was
was I think I was the same, exactly the same, mate.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a case of like, I'm basically working for free on, but like you say, it's taking the opportunity and I met a lot of good people from there that I'm still in contact with now as well. So they are valuable, they do serve a purpose, but I think you've also got to take a lot of ownership in your own development as well. If you're there, if you're working for free or you're working unpaid, then if you really want it as a career, then
Yeah.
you've got to kind of squeeze as much out of it as you can.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think actually, to credit, I mean, you would have worked under them as well, like Stu Metcalf and James Clark Reed, who I think they probably were a bit pioneering in that sense. They definitely was one of the only, I think, paid internships that I knew of at the time.
Mm.
And albeit, it might have not have been, enough to cover anything more than rent. It was great to actually see that. So they definitely did a great job in setting up that sort of scheme. And I think they've had a really good set of analysts that have come through Brighton and gone on to different things. So credit to those guys as well. And it was enjoyable to work at Brighton. It was a good club. It is a good club.
Yeah.
Clearly been on a really nice trajectory, and I think it says a lot about about that sort of path that they've been on.
Mm. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I enjoyed my time there very much. It was really good. So what were you doing at Brighton then? Was it the same kind of thing that you were doing at Swansea? Was there a bit of a difference in the role?
Yeah, I'd say there was more focus on assisting James was leading the first team analysis under Gus Payet, obviously was the manager at the time, which was interesting character as you'll know. And yeah, it was very much assisting James. So in a lot of the opposition sort of material and work that we were putting in front of Gus and his team, and in all fairness to Gus, I think he was quite hands-on. He was very much open to clipping his own stuff. So we would put an awful lot of opposition preview and resource in front of the coaches for them to put it together and assist us to create the pre-match meetings and obviously then the post-match meetings. The live tagging aspect was obviously something as well. I think most people are used to that now, or maybe if you've got the luxury of having a direct feed into your laptop, whatever software you're using, we would have to use the camera and tag at the same time, which was quite challenging and quite. There was that was probably the first understanding of real pressure that I knew of in football, because we had to tag all these events, all these player moments. So we'd have hotkeys going all over the place. One hand on the camera, one hand on the laptop, and my first introduction to that was probably an absolute sort of car crash. And then a few weeks in, you're learning all the hotkeys and able to sort of tag every sort of event that you wanted and the player influence that you wanted to feed into that kind of, I suppose, the impact at halftime potentially via James and obviously via the management. So that was a sort of a bit of an overview there. And the only other thing actually I think was another really good exercise for myself was we did a kind of a goals for and against, chances for and against, shots for and against sort of database of, and I'm sure other clubs were probably doing this as well, but it felt really maybe pioneering at the time. We were doing that, going into a lot of depth on that so that we could give Gus and his team an understanding of where the opposition was threatening. Of course, today with all the data and with various different companies, it's a click of a button. You can see the sequences of play that lead up to chances and goals. we were doing that all by hand, or I certainly was on, a Sunday and a Monday. So I was wishing that half time or full time of every single championship game on a Saturday would be 0-0 or 1-0. Well, I was at the start, and then as I got into it, it was like, okay, actually, the more goals, the more you can learn about the opposition and so forth. So, at the start, it was very much wishing a 1-0 finish, and then by the end, it was, if we've got a 3-3 or a 5-3 thriller, then it's more sort of more information to get our teeth stuck into.
Okay, so I hope you're enjoying the video so far, but I have a really quick interruption for anybody with an interest in video analysis. So if that's you, please do click the link down below the video for InPlay Online. So just to give a quick overview, because I think it'll be relevant to a lot of people that are watching this particular video. So InPlay Online is a cloud-based video analysis software. So it allows you to tag your videos, and when you've done your tagging, that includes adding labels, adding comments, adding notes and voice notes even, and you can even telestrate and draw over your clip. So if you are an aspiring analyst looking for your job and you want to create a portfolio of work, if you're a scout looking to make your kind of reports a little bit better and more animated, if you're a coach looking to get into analysis a little bit more, then this tool will be great for you because it starts at just £15 a month. So once you've done your analysis, you can add all the clips to different playlists, which can be downloaded and exported offline. You can put them into presentations and also share them to different people within your team. So it comes with a whole bunch of other features, but I'll let you click the link down below if you are interested. As I say, packages start at just £15 a month, so it's a very affordable solution if you are looking for something to help with your video analysis. So that's it for the interruption. Let's get back to the video. It is quite amazing, like the jobs that we would do even just 10 years ago, but even obviously you could go longer than that for before our time, like what we used to do and how simple that is now with the technology that is available now. So the role has definitely changed, and I suppose it leads on to the kind of coach analyst role as well. Like you mentioned the chap earlier in terms of the first one that you maybe noticed in that role, but we are seeing more clubs advertise that type of role. And in fact, the one I know probably the most is Jordan, who I met, who worked at Brighton. He would have been after you because he joined with me, but he's obviously at Newcastle now.
Newcastle, yeah.
And that's kind of his role. So I'm really interested about that role in terms of, what are they kind of, the balance that they would spend on the grass coaching and with the coaches in the coaching room, and like you say, in the dungeons, in the room coding and doing all that sort of stuff. So really interesting.
No, I think the emergence of that sort of coach analyst role has been really, really interesting. I think there was definitely, if I think back to when I was an analyst, there was definitely a divide, 100%. It was you're a coach on the grass or you're an analyst who's, sort of predominantly inside unless you're filming. And actually it probably was when I know we'll probably go into Norwich in a little bit of detail, but when I got into sort of further down the line with Norwich, and my influence on the opposition work, the set piece work and things like that, it's at that point we never got that opportunity to sort of cross that white line and be involved on the grass, and that's absolutely fine. But I did feel like potentially there would have been added value for us who were going through multiple matches, analysing the game, the opponents, the individuals, to be a little bit closer to the work that was going on the grass. So I can definitely see now why you've got people who sort of split those roles. And I know of Danny Roll at Sheffield Wednesday, who's incredibly successful, I think, and has talked incredibly well when you've seen him on in the Euros. And I think he started out initially, in that sort of analyst role, morphing into kind of a coach analyst, and now he's a really successful head coach. So, or in my opinion, he is. So I think it's certainly a different pathway and a really exciting one that most people may be getting into the analysis role if they have a desire on that coaching side as well. Perhaps there is a really nice different route to go down compared to perhaps what maybe I saw back sort of 8 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. I will come back to that because about the kind of career trajectory for analysts, I've got that down as a talking point. So we'll come back to that. Sure. But what we'll do, Craig, is we'll skip over to Norwich then because we've obviously hinted about that. So from Brighton, you were there for around was it a full season or was it part?
No, it was just under 8 months. I think it was. It was cut short because of the opportunity at Norwich, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So first paid job, you must have been happy with that. Got a bit of money coming in finally. So
I think it was a must. Yeah, it was a necessity. I needed to. I think if you'd have to ask James this, but I certainly would have liked to have stayed the whole season. But of course, if an opportunity comes up, first paid role at a great club that was kind of sort of Premier League Championship, you kind of got to jump at that, and good people in the building already. So it was the first time role that was sort of taking a bit of a lead on the first team analysis at Norwich under Donald Barron, who you're probably aware of. under his sort of guidance. So the first sort of designated analyst for them, I think Donald before me was probably doing a lot of stuff. The first team analysis, probably some academy guidance, probably some recruitment. So I think it was good to see that the club had put some emphasis on having somebody focused, solely on that kind of first team piece.
Yeah, I think is Donald at Loughborough now? Is he doing
Yeah,
that? Isn't he? Yeah.
yeah. No, he is. I speak to Donald every now and again. I think he's doing some great stuff. He's probably one of the people, if you're in a club, not to plug him too much, but if you're in a club and you're looking for, to have a placement student, I'd certainly be going to Donald. I think, what he has experienced over the course of his career in football and what he's trying to do with his students and give them the best experience possible to succeed. I think and then the university, of course, and there are others obviously as well, but I know for sure he's got some really good students coming out and going into some really good roles.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and Norwich as well, they're quite known to have a good analysis department, and that's obviously grown from Donald as well, from yourself. So, in terms of then the role you did there, was, again, how did that differ to what you'd done previously at Swansea, Brighton, but also were you kind of picking things from them previous clubs and thinking, I like what we did there at Brighton, let's try and implement that and put my own stamp on it here at Norwich? Like, were you kind of learning as you were going and implementing that into the Norwich role?
Yeah, I think there's bits and pieces of that. Obviously, I was still quite young then, and very much my first opportunity. And I think Donald had set quite a lot of structure in place there. He just needed somebody to really come in and work hard and implement. So I think there was probably, if I'm being honest, I probably didn't put my stamp on it initially, but as it evolved, you start to like work with the coaches, understand their needs, understand the resources that you have, and then start to really try and maximize what you have and what you can put out and impact on the pitch with. So yeah, I think we started out in that way, and then as we grew, because shortly after I was there, and I was very much doing we were using probably Prozone, PZ3 at the time, going through and analysing and clipping everything out and providing pre-match and post-match and all that sort of stuff, similar to the other roles, but it was just me. Soon after that, we brought somebody else, or Donald brought somebody else in, Lee Dunn, who's still at the club now. He's head of recruitment now, I believe, at Norwich, and he's probably one of my best friends, actually, in football, even though we haven't worked together for many years. He had a lot more experience than me, actually, and he came in, and it's a funny story that we kind of always have a bit of a laugh and joke about. I was quite young still at the time, and I thought, I would potentially be on that progression to kind of lead the department. And Lee came in with more experience, and it was definitely set out that he would be the right person to sort of lead the department and sort of guide us. So for the first couple of days, I probably wasn't the best person to work with, because I was probably threw my toys out the pram a little bit, if I'm being completely honest. But this is something that I've learned, actually, is like you've got to give people time, and you've got to understand who the person is behind, whether it's a player, there's a person behind the player, there's a person behind the coach, there's a person behind the analyst. And actually, after a couple of days, quickly realized that I'm going to learn an awful lot from someone like Donald, someone like Lee, and we need to work together. And we did that extremely well. And we actually ended up having such a good sort of working relationship that we, like some departments do, we split the games off. So we'd work sort of together, but one person would take a lead on one match while the other person's working on the next opponent, doing exactly the same work, but it means you can kind of work far in advance. And then when it comes down to a couple of days before the game, you're helping each other out to get things boxed off and get certain things done, whether it's set pieces, penalties. We also had an intern that came in, Callum, who I think is at Brighton currently, Callum Johnson. I think he's currently at Brighton, actually. And yeah, that would all come together nicely, and then we'd all execute on the game, and then it would go again, and then it would be my turn, and I would take the lead on the next game, and so on and so on. So, and within that, of course, you've got all the normal sort of roles and requirements and jobs within post-match, pre-match, etc., individuals, and so on.
So, was your time there then? Was there a playoff final in that time? You got, because I also want to ask you, which managers did you? Because Norwich is quite known for swapping managers quite a lot. I don't know if it was the same back then, but who did you work with in terms of the managers?
Yeah, so we had Chris Hughton was the first manager that I worked under, and he had Paul Trollopan, Colin Calderwood, great coaches, and Dave Watson, goalkeeper coach, great coach. So that was the first sort of management. And then we had a short period under Neil Adams, who's still at the club now. I think he's assistant technical director, sporting director. So we had him as well. Then after that, we had Alex Neil, and it was under Alex Neil's reign that I decided to, and I will come on to it, decided to move out of football. So each of them have different ways of working, and that adaptation sort of and transitional phase is really key, I think. You've got to be able to be flexible enough and not have too much of a big ego to understand what people want, what people need, how to speak to people in different ways. Because, again, they're all human beings. They all have different words, different accents, different ways of communicating, and you've got to be able to adapt to that. And I think that's probably one of the biggest learnings is, again, you got to listen, take time, give people an opportunity to get across what they need to you, and also the other way as well. They need to be able to give you that time, an opportunity to kind of express yourself as well. So yeah, that bit's quite key. I think is that sort of understanding of the relationship between the staff, and that goes outside the coaching staff, the medical, sports science, and kit staff, and everything like that. You've got to understand the full group. Essentially, you're all trying to win games, right? So
yeah, definitely. Because I remember at Brighton, I don't know if it was probably the same, but it was in the stadium. The analysts did have a separate office, so the analysts were separate from coaches were just outside. Obviously, there's different ways to do it. But yeah, in terms of I just want to talk a little bit more about the relationships as well that you have in a department, and whether that is, like you mentioned, all the sports science staff, the medical team, etc. Because for me, especially just going back to the Brighton example, when I moved down there, which probably would have been the same for you, like I knew nobody in Brighton apart from the people at Brighton. So like it was even on my day off, it was like, well, what do I want to do? I'll hang out with the people that I work with because I've not really know anyone else. So you do get kind of close bonds with these people that you work with. You spend in far too many hours a week, during the season. You spend a lot of time. So, like, so you've got a balance of different personalities as well, and kind of you might be setting your ways with one way, and then a new coach comes in, they do it different, they expect different of you. So it's quite an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. I think you like I said, you have to be adaptable, really. You have to be understanding of people's situations, and I think understand that everybody's got a job to do. That job might be different, but it's all coming together for a common goal. And if you can all get on the same page, and I think there's been clubs previously that have shown that, and Norwich, to be fair, is probably one of those as well. Like in that promotion season, we were under a bit of pressure under Alex Neil to get promoted, and that pressure can sometimes maybe get too much, and you can fold underneath it. But with us, I think it galvanized everybody to know and understand the exact direction we wanted to travel in, and we had a great great sort of victory at what a place, Wembley, to do it. If you're going to do it, and you can guarantee yourself promotion, you choose to do it via Wembley. I wouldn't want to be on the other side of it. And I know you had Phil on. I sort of said to myself I wouldn't mention Phil, but I think when you did a podcast with Phil, who was at Borough, he mentioned not to speak about it too much. So maybe we won't speak about it too much, but I felt Phil's pain on that day. But of course, on the flip side, it was an amazing way to do it and achieve promotion back to the Premier League. And just to touch on the management there, we had Alex Neil and his staff who came in and had to really hit the ground running. And it was important for us, myself, Lee, and Don, who was then more on the recruitment side, as well as people like Lee Darnborough, to really understand what Alex and his team needed, and that needed to happen quick, because if it doesn't, then you're not really gonna, you're not hitting the ground running, right? You've got to really adapt quickly, so that you can set yourselves up for success. And I think we obviously did our best to do that, and luckily we achieved success and got ourselves back to the Prem.
Yeah, definitely. I've been I haven't worked a playoff final. Well, I've worked at Wembley before, but I've been as a fan, as a winner in a playoff final, and as a loser in a playoff final. So
okay.
definitely been through that. Perfect. So we'll kind of talk a little bit more then, Craig, on. So obviously Norwich was the one, you left Norwich and you were out of the game. So I want to talk about kind of work-life balance, also the kind of the lifespan of the analyst role. It's kind of, we spoke about the amount of hours that you work in. Is it kind of a young person's game, in the fact that it's quite hard, and if you've got the family commitments that you get as you get older, it maybe is a less of a fit. So I just want to kind of talk around that and your thought process at the time when you left Norwich. You took a jump, you basically left football. So what were you thinking at the time, and why did that happen?
I think there was a number of things. Obviously, it gets spoken about a lot, that work-life balance. I think I probably wasn't doing a good enough job to create a balance. I had a girlfriend at the time who's now my wife, and she and her family were very understanding. They come from a football background anyway, so I had every opportunity to stay in the game. There wasn't any external factors that were trying to drag me out. I actually couldn't see sort of a longer term future on the personal side, being able to have things like, own your own house and have a family and have a dog and things like that. You probably just can't do those things, because Although I think I've been proven wrong because there are people who I know today who are able to, have been in the game a long time, who are now definitely able to do all of those things. So I think the landscape has changed a bit, but back then I couldn't see that for myself.
Yeah.
So I just took a little bit of a gamble and just said, do you know what? I'm not sure that I can see a future in this, the way that I'm going. I'm not sure that I can change direction. Some people go into recruitment. Some people might take a step back and maybe try and go into coaching. I decided that, you know what, I need to make a little bit of a clean break. And I kind of still remember the feeling that I had going into the gaffer's office. It was Alex Neil at the time. We were sort of midway through in the Prem. And, I kind of felt like I was 4 feet tall, the pressure on my shoulders. I needed to sort of relieve that pressure. And I went in and I just said to the gaffer, I think I need to like make a change just for personal reasons and to try and get a little bit of work-life balance. I think the balance isn't even at the moment. And he was great about it, to be fair. And he sort of said, I bet that's a weight, a load off your mind. And it was, and I was able to then kind of move on. The only thing I didn't have in mind was something to move on to next. I didn't have anything lined up, but it was just a case of need to take a little bit of a gamble here to sort of, freshen it up and give myself an opportunity to find that balance again. So yeah, I obviously stepped out of football for a short period then.
Yeah, no, I didn't know it was mid-season as well, so that takes a lot to do that, because a lot of people in that situation would have been like, let me just get to the end of the season and then. But that is kind of the trap that a lot of people get in as well. Like, I'll just get to the end of the season, you get a couple of weeks off, and you think, oh, it's actually not so bad, and then season starts again, and it's exactly the same or even worse. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, it's tough, and we had a great department, good people. That season was tough. I think for them, they had I think they ended up getting relegated that season. But look, I mean, as a promoted side, odds on you probably are going to find it difficult. So it wasn't all of that. We had a good thing going on there. I think it was mainly just that personal aspect, and perhaps it for other people they manage it in a different way. But for me at the time, it just wasn't making sense. So I had to just take that little bit of a punt and a little bit of a gamble and just sort of make a bit of a clean break and try and find a different route and a different path, which obviously maybe we'll come on to next.
yeah, definitely. 'Cause just on the kind of career plan, because obviously I'm no longer an analyst. It's been a while since I was an analyst, but I agree with what you say. Like at that time, I didn't. It was kind of you start as an intern. You kind of skip the academy spot, but like a bit of academy analyst, then you get to the first team, and then you're kind of head of analysis, and then what? But like I said, it does seem that people have gone down the recruitment. There's some analysts that were analysts when we were analysts that are like technical directors now.
Yep.
That's great, headers of recruitment, really interesting jobs. And then others have totally left football altogether, and then some have done what you've done, where you're still involved in the game, but you're just from a different side of things, basically. So yeah, there are options now, I think, for people to kind of do. But another point on that, though, I think a lot of people, it is quite ballsy what you did in terms of like leaving technically without a plan, because a lot of people may have thought, I've worked hard, I went to uni, I've worked hard to get here. Am I wasting it? Like, it's a bit of a waste. Like, a lot of people would really kill to be in this job, but I'm just going to leave it. So I don't know if that was on your mind as well, like probably keep it a bit longer.
Yeah, no, it was, and maybe if I was on a different day of the week, I wouldn't have gone into Alex Neil's office. You know what I mean? It was sort of tipping in the balance to and fro. But that did play on my mind a lot. You spent a lot of time and effort to get to this point, but it probably just was I couldn't see the next step, so I just needed to sort of rip the band-aid off, as I say, and just go for it. And yeah, there wasn't a plan, but I sort of in the same breath I kind of backed myself to be able to do something next.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that was. I knew I'd be able to do something that would put food on the table, which is the main thing. It just, I suppose, in terms of career trajectory at that point, there were multiple different options, or could have been multiple different options. And how it transpired, I probably didn't immediately see that route that I went down back into the sort of sports tech, but it worked out obviously for the best. And maybe there's a little bit of luck in that as well, which I was fortunate to receive.
Yeah. Definitely, and I just want to make clear that we're not talking about this to put people off being analysts. We just want to make it clear that this is kind of the reality as well. And some people love it, and it's fine. It's totally fine. But I think it is important to make people aware that during the season it is intense. You're not going to be able to just get a day off and go nip on have a holiday. Like things like picking your kids up from school, you're probably not going to be able to do that. Like so, yeah. There's lots of things to consider when looking at the career as well, and that's why you might. Your perspective might change from when you're a 19-year-old to when you're late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, and in all fairness, I am hoping that the landscape, and I do think the landscape may have changed. I think there probably is let's be honest, better kind of remuneration and finances involved. I'm hoping some of my peers and colleagues and ex-colleagues that are still in the game are they're working hard, but they're also getting paid for it. I potentially hope there's more flexibility. A lot of the world now is working from home sometimes. I don't know if that's the case for analysts day to day, but I'm hoping that there is a little bit more flexibility there, and also some more other options. But knowing a lot of the people I've worked with previously, if you give them more flexibility, more time, and more resource, for example, there's more data involved, there's more video involved. The mentality of these people is probably to work even harder. So that is just the mentality of kind of people who work in football, is they're extremely hardworking, and respect each and every one of them for the jobs that they do in any role in football. But the reality is, as you say, Chris, it is quite tough, and you've got to be of a certain mindset to step into football. So and for me, I suppose it worked for a few years, and then actually perhaps my mindset was maybe more destined to do something else.
Okay, so if you've made it this far into the video, you must be enjoying the content. Either that, or you have simply fallen asleep. So whichever one of them it is, you probably won't mind me asking you for a quick favour. So as you know, I'm always looking to grow the channel. So the bigger the channel gets, the more people we can reach and impact, but also the bigger and better guests we can invite onto the channel to have these types of chats. So with that in mind, if you haven't already done so, I would very much appreciate it if you did hit the subscribe button down below the video. The stats are showing around 25% of viewers are subscribed. So there's a big chunk of you that are watching the videos, but you haven't yet hit the subscribe button, but I will let you off because you can do it right now. It's free and it literally takes 1 second. So if you go down, click the subscribe button, it would mean a lot to the channel and help the channel to grow. So that's all for now. Let's get back to the video. Before you went back into sports tech, I want to just talk about a little bit of that gap, because it was what we would call a normal job. So you left sport, tell us what you're doing. You're working for an estate agent?
Yeah, really random. And some of my friends and family always sort of kind of banter me for doing this. But, I just needed a job. I'd moved from Norwich over to the Northwest. So I currently live in Blackburn. So that's sort of my local club. Preston's not far, in Burnley. And a job came up working in like property, and there's half an eye on, property is quite interesting. Maybe in the future that might be something that could see. So I just wanted to kind of get a job first of all, and this came up. It helped that the manager of the firm was like a big football fan, so we connected instantly. So it was great. I sort of ended up managing like a rental or lettings portfolio. So it wasn't the most taxing job in the world, but it was different, and it taught me lots of different things. Lots of different soft skills, and working with, you called it like a normal job. It taught me how to deal with other people's kind of problems and problem solve with people that weren't professional athletes, probably at the top of their game. We're talking about, Joe Blogs down the street. So it's very, very different. Even skills like just picking up the phone and having somebody sort of, argue at you down the phone about something to do with a burst pipe or something in their property, just things like that. It taught me some different skills, first of all. And it also taught me that actually I felt like I didn't belong there. So it meant that actually my next path needed to be back on track. So back into sort of sport, which is where, the story, moves on to going back into sort of sports tech in the consultancy at the coaching manual, TCM Performance, with reuniting with James Clark Reed was the sort of the next step back in.
Yeah, definitely. So before the TCM then, was there a time when you were working the letting? Did you ever think that you made a mistake leaving football how you did, or was it just maybe you can't do lettings, you'll do something else? But did you ever think, oh, actually, what have I done here? What have I done? I want to get back in.
I think probably at the start it was like, oh, this is refreshing, this is new, this is different. I've got my work-life balance back a little bit more and that sort of stuff. It probably was like, okay, this is interesting. Maybe I can do something related to this or whatever. I think as time progresses and I realized that this wasn't as much of an interest to me as possible, and maybe my skill sets were more aligned with football or sports or analysis, I then started to think more about, okay, what am I, the more time I spend away from football and analysis, am I giving myself or removing the opportunity to get back in? So that was creeping in a little bit. And then, of course, like after a year, of working completely outside of football, I was then motivated to really go, okay, I need to try and get back in. And it was, to quote James again, it was sort of his help and his guidance. He'd moved out of his role at Brighton after many years, and he was now working at the coaching manual in a consultancy role. And he was like, he had a good opportunity, and we sort of synced up, and we aligned on certain things, and that just made sense for me to try and get back in.
Yeah.
And that was the next step. Yeah, which was perfect.
Yeah, nice. So, what did you actually do there? What were you doing there? Just kind of speaking with, consulting with clubs. I've
So
no idea what you did at that
yeah,
role.
yeah. So the coaching manual had one part of the business around focused around coaching and education, and we had this performance side of the business where we were basically kind of consultants to clubs around different workflows. And the biggest one for me was actually Coach Paint. If you know of the Telestration software Coach Paint. So my main focus was in a customer sort of solutions, customer success role to try and present the software, the Telestration software, and what it could do for the analysis world. And there wasn't much of that back. I can't remember where the date was, but let's say 6-7 years ago, there wasn't much Telestration. It was just, if I remember at Norwich, I'm drawing a static line arrow on an image, and we're saying, yeah, you go here. That was the level of detail that we're putting on the video. Now you could obviously have moving graphics, much like you see on obviously Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
So that was my role, was to at the company TrackAb. That was my role, was basically to on behalf of TrackAb at TCM Performance, was to sort of support that drive of Coach Paint, which again was really, really enjoyable. Yeah, I had 4 years spanning TCM Performance and then actually going to work for TrackAb.
Yeah.
Of actually doing that role of like presenting, educating people, business development around the use of that tool. And I think we probably had some really good success for a period as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I do find the whole because obviously Telestration is like another part of the analyst toolkit. You've got the data, which we'll speak about the tracking data in a second, but then we've got that. You've also got the Telestration. So I will link down below for people that are interested. The episode I did with Ewan Sharp, so he actually shared his screen, did a little bit of a presentation, and that had some Telestrations in there. So you are obviously a heavy user of the tool, Craig. I'm just curious to ask you, like, because when I see some stuff online, some people kind of overload like they think, oh well, I've got all these tools, I need to stick everything on this clip.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it can just be a simple arrow or something just very, very simple. So I just wanted to ask you about that in terms of your thoughts on the what to include, but also just when illustrations can be useful, but also when they can maybe potentially be a hindrance as well.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a balance. We used to have a bit of a joke, and I laugh with some clients on how potentially not to use the graphics and telestration, and you don't want to make the image, the still image or the moving image, look like a Christmas tree with multiple lights and flashing images and stuff like that. We don't want that. What we want to do is make sure that the timing of the actual input of the telestration and the delivery of that and the opportunity to get your coaching point across all kind of marries up.
Yeah.
Providing there's not too much detail on there that detracts from the point that you're trying to make.
Yeah.
I think that's basically the balance that at that point we were trying to present to the clubs. The guidance was, what's the point you're trying to get across, and is anything else going to take away from that key component? If it is, then maybe it needs to be edited and changed slightly. And of course, there are telestration softwares now that are really advanced, and lots of different types of moving graphics and all that sort of stuff to really grab your attention. And I think maybe there's been a few studies that have been done as well around what that can actually do for maybe the retention of information. And that's the whole point, right? Is you're delivering so much information to these athletes. They get so much information, so much input. How much can they actually store and translate onto impact onto the pitch?
Yeah.
And what you don't want to do is you don't want to overload that too much. And if you do, then kind of what's the point, right? So it's all about balance, I think, which can be different for different audiences.
Yeah, definitely agreed. Definitely. So let's get to SkillCorner then, Craig. So obviously the current role. So I'll leave it to you to give a little overview of what SkillCorner do and what's your actual role at the company.
Yep. So I've been at SkillCorner as a business development manager, looking after the UK and North America. I've got 2 colleagues that work with me, Aidan, who works in the UK, and then Matt, who works in the US. And our job is essentially to try and educate, present, and support clients around the use of our data in football or soccer clubs, depending where you're at, and federations. So SkillCorner, for those of you that aren't aware, is a broadcast tracking company. So we essentially take predominantly broadcast video, applying sort of computer vision, machine learning technologies. A lot of really smart people in our Paris office who compute all that information. We're able to track the players and understand the players on the pitch and those players that are off camera as well, to a decent level of accuracy. and we scale that across a wide market. So when I say wide market, we cover, I think we're on about 90 competitions now. So of course, what you can see right now is that, or you can tell immediately, is our main goal is scalability. So we want to give tracking data and other derived information to our clients at scale to power decisions in football, predominantly in recruitment.
Yeah.
So we currently have, the raw tracking data. We have physical data and we have contextual data. So the tracking data piece is a really complex one, which you probably dive into a bit more detail. And then the physical data and contextual data are derived metrics and information that we provide to hopefully give the clients a helping hand. Those clients that can't work and scale with sort of the raw tracking data piece, which I know you spoke to Sam Gregory and a few other people around, the use of tracking data, who, by the way, are much more qualified than myself to be talking about the use of it. But yeah, very, very powerful.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned clubs and federations. So are you working with elite? Is that what it is? Is it clubs, organisations? Is it like what type of clubs are you working with?
Yeah, so we have I think we're on about 200 clients now. That's federations and clubs. So yeah, we're working with Premier League clubs, Championship clubs, League One, League Two clubs. I think that's the what I've seen at the SkillCorner. The beauty is that we want to be able to work across multiple different leagues, competitions, so that we can help service the club across furthest across in League Two that has minimal resource, all the way up to, I'm sure Will and the team at Liverpool won't mind me saying this, but arguably the pioneers of using tracking data in Liverpool that can use vast amounts of information. So we want to be able to work across all those different landscapes. And of course, the federation space as well is slightly different. You might have our clients in certain federations wanting to use it more for tournament football, match analysis, also maybe player monitoring as well. How are their players doing when they're playing domestically, so that they can understand which ones to choose for their camps and so forth. So it's varying really in terms of the different types of clubs with the different resources and skill sets, and also federations and confederations as well.
Yeah, nice. So you mentioned a second ago, and this is on the website as well, so tracking data, physical data, contextual data. So can we just dive a little bit deeper into them? So is the most basic form tracking data, is that literally just XY coordinates, and how often is it measured? Just a little bit more if you can on that, Craig.
Yeah, for sure. So we offer tracking data across all those competitions, which is derived from broadcast. One thing that a lot of our clients learn immediately about us, and I think most people out there will know about us, is that we're super transparent and honest. And we know that deriving tracking data from broadcast video has its limitations. So understanding the full picture is really, really key. So we derive the on-screen tracking data, as well as we have what we call an extrapolated model, so we can understand the players and predict accurately where the players off camera are. So you can have that full picture of all of the players in the ball. So yeah, we're understanding the position of the players and the ball 10 times per second. So you can imagine, I don't know what the quick math on that is, but you've probably got like upwards of maybe a million sort of rows of data. Yeah. And most of our clients are probably going to take event data, sync those up so that they can add more context to their events. And if I just draw back on Sam's conversation, which was great when you spoke to him, he explained very well what they do at probably US Soccer, and what he's done previously is they are trying to add more context to their events. If you just take event data, you get pass, shot, or Gill, or whatever. Actually, if you're able to add the tracking data, and you have the skill set to do that, you can add so much more context around what's the opposition doing and what pressures involved and what options were there, and so on. So that's essentially what the tracking data can help our clients do, as well as plugging into different match analysis softwares that help you kind of, again, explain that full picture and work on a match by match basis. So it's probably either that, or potentially building your own metrics and models, like the really sophisticated big departments that can handle that volume of data.
Yeah, I'll link the video with Sam down below, because that was interesting, and Sam explains it really well as well.
Yeah,
so,
very good. Yeah, better job than me, probably.
And definitely than me as well. So yeah, I'll link that below for anyone that wants to check that out. So in terms of then you dealing with clubs then now, Craig, are you you mentioned your two colleagues, are you speaking with the analysts at these clubs to make sure they are getting the most from the data? Like, are you helping them? And obviously they're probably doing their own thing, and you're probably not privy to everything they're doing with your data, but are you having those conversations with the analysts on a kind of weekly
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah, and I suppose it depends on which department's using our data, which I probably should have mentioned. So most of our clubs and clients are using it for recruitment purposes, but there are some that are using it for kind of match analysis and performance, and maybe they want to monitor their players sort of over blocks of games, how are they doing physically, what medical departments, when they're bringing in players, potentially understanding, injury prevention and monitoring, how they bounce back from a certain injury and things like that. So it does really depend on the user. More of a match analysis use case would definitely warrant more conversation. So 100%, there's a couple of great sort of Championship and League One clubs that use it a little bit for that use case, and we're often speaking to them and trying to guide them on what visualization they want to use, how best to use the data, minimum benchmarking, and things like that. And then on the recruitment side, no one really wants to tell you the secret sauce, right? And we wouldn't expect anyone to either. But of course, if they do, we'll help guide them in whatever they want to do. But on the recruitment side, it might be a recruitment analyst, head of recruitment, sporting directors, even sometimes the ownership of a football club. Those sorts of people we're also dealing with, and that might be not as frequent as the other use case, and it might be just guidance on certain updates and things like that, and also on what's the best way to leverage and impact the grass, and impact the players coming in, which is always interesting because everyone's got a different way of doing it. It's not one perfect way. Everyone's got a different player profile, different game model, and so on and so on and so on. So yeah, a couple of different sort of personnel and use cases that we have there.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned maybe recruitment is probably what it's used for a lot of the time. So just dumb it down even more than that, then, Craig. So how, for those that are wondering, well, why would tracking data help the recruitment process? So what kind of things would a potential recruitment analyst be using that data for? Just to maybe, let's say they are looking for a new centre forward, how will the tracking data help maybe inform the decision?
Yeah, well, I think the tracking data, for the sophisticated, well-resourced clubs, they will probably use that tracking data, as I mentioned, sync it with event data, and derive a lot of different metrics that are really bespoke to their club model. And plug a player in, do they fit their model? Yes or no? There's more to it than that. But with I can probably go into a bit more detail on our derived metrics, such as the physical data and the contextual. So say if you're looking for a centre forward at a club, you might start, and I know we're going to look through an example later on, but you might start with like global benchmarking, which leagues physically have really quick players that have good sprinting capacity or sort of a good engine, whatever you term that, in a club as. You can start to look at maybe a league benchmarking. You can then filter into, okay, what are some of those dominant teams within some of those leagues that actually express those attributes that we are really interested in our, centre forward profile. So that's some really kind of easy wins. And then you can obviously go into granular level of, okay, well, we've got these specific attributes that we know we need our centre forward to do. From a physical perspective, can we just tick those boxes initially? And that sometimes is the initial point of contact or the initial search will be, the game has gone, the game is physically dominant, and it has increased. If you look at some of the data points over the course of the last few years, the physicality certainly certain competitions has increased. So actually it might be the first baseline level. If they're scouting players and these players are available, do they hit a minimum threshold of physicality? Like, if they don't, maybe we're not going to kind of spend as much resource looking at them, and we'll prioritize other players. And then as soon as you add the contextual data, which I know we'll explain in a little bit more detail, understanding the movement patterns, the passing ability, and how they deal with pressure, you combine all that together into a specific profile that you as a club are aligned on for your centre forward, and then you'll start to really generate a powerful sort of search engine. Okay, we want a quick forward that runs really runs a lot or sprints a lot in possession because we're a transitional team, and is very direct, that runs in behind and gets into the box in crossing situations. Really clear profile. Let's go and search the earth for those players that fit that profile. So that could be a journey of a recruitment analyst or a recruitment team to try and find that particular profile. So that's probably aligning all of those data sets together really to try and basically search for undervalued. Everybody wants a good profile of a player that's undervalued that they can get on the sort of cheap, which is, I think, is difficult.
Yeah, it definitely is difficult. So, so you hinted there about kind of showing an example. So we can kind of lead into that now, Craig, if that's okay. You mentioned you've got a couple of slides we'll potentially look at. So you might give the viewers kind of a bit more so they can see it with their eyes. So I think you should be able to share your screen, Craig. So if you want to go for it, and we'll see what you've got.
This is kind of the same sort of workflow really as we just explained, but obviously using some data. And I put a German slant on it. Obviously the Euros are on. I'm sure everybody's probably got a bit of a headache after last night's win. I'll be honest with you, I was supporting England as well, even though I am Welsh. But
I was gonna ask you that. So yeah, obviously when this video comes out, it will be after the final. So either England or European champions at that point, or they may have lost. But yeah, we're recording this the day after they beat the Netherlands, and I was gonna ask you if you watched it with a smile or with a bit of a, were you a bit as a
yeah,
Welshman, were you happy or not, basically?
well, if I'm being honest, when Ollie Watkins scored that goal and he made that running behind, we've this may be something we can share at a later date, but we did a bit of a study on Ollie Watkins and his movement this season and his ability to kind of run in behind, be really direct and sort of run, within the width of the box. And I was looking at that and thinking that's perfect. He may have only done it a couple of times last night, but it was perfect. It was his opportunity. So I did get up off my seat and spill my drink in celebration. So I'm not gonna lie to you. I definitely was supporting England last night. But
Nice.
yeah, and we'll have to see how the final this weekend goes. I did say to some of my friends last night, if Spain are wearing red, I'm going to find it very difficult to support England red versus white. But yeah, no, I'll be rooting for England this weekend.
Perfect.
So yeah, I put a bit of a German slant on this, obviously, because with the Euros, and all we're doing here is we're looking at sort of two metrics, and of course, most of our clients will combine lots of different metrics to understand, globally where leagues are for physicality, let's say. So this is something that we call intensity. We're looking at peak sprint velocity, so that ability to repeat sort of top speeds, and then the count of high intensity actions during ball in play time. And I've just highlighted the top 5 leagues as well as the Championship and obviously the Bundesliga 1, 2, and 3. So you can start to get a bit of an understanding of where different competitions sit for physicality for these metrics. So that's often, the first line. And if I just pick on one, you've got the Czech First League, which is, quite physical. That ability to repeat those high intensity actions is quite high. And of course, the Premier League we'd expect to be at the top.
Yeah.
On average, every player is quick and is probably quicker than any of the other players in any of these other leagues. So, but what you can do then is you can sort of filter that down into, well, we want to look at a specific league, so we're looking at Bundesliga 2. What do those teams look like for certain physical sort of attributes? And here I've just highlighted St. Pauli, who got promoted, I believe, last year, and we're looking at the minutes they spend in possession on the X, and then the player average meters per minute, which is kind of a bit of a signal for kind of work rate. And they dominate the ball, or at least I believe. I haven't watched a single game of them, but as they go into Brighton, or as the manager's gone to Brighton, I assume his philosophy is to dominate the ball.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of time in possession, and therefore the kind of work rate, similar to the sort of Man City, Liverpool, or the dominant teams, they at a player level, their kind of work rate and movement is lower. We often see, but then when you flip that to the out of possession, so the opponent team in possession, and we've got the same metrics here, but we can now see that St. Pauli have a higher work rate out of possession, and the minutes that they spend out of possession is lower, obviously, because they're a dominant ball playing team, I imagine. So you can then start to dig into the detail a little bit further. This could be used for match analysis. It could be further used for that recruitment drive. Are we signing a player that plays in the type of team physically that we want? Yes or no? And then you can take it another level, as we mentioned. And on purpose, I've done Germany 1, 2, and 3, Belgium and Austria. I don't know any of these players. I did that on purpose, so I can't pass any comment.
Yeah.
But again, simply looking at a profile. So we're looking here for a centre forward with pace and with sprinting capacity when their team has possession. So maybe that type of transitional direct forward. So you can now start to see the top right hand corner those players that are relatively quick and that also have good sprinting capacity when their team has the ball.
Yeah.
So you can start to get a little bit of a feel of building that profile and trying to find those players that fit our needs as a club and as a recruitment department. And then the next phase of this is now starting to combine some other metrics into that. So we mentioned about our contextual metrics. We call it game intelligence. So that's off-ball running. It's passing synergy to off-ball running. So if you have a player that's in possession, they have lots of different off-ball runs to try and pass to. It's understanding the synergy of that. And then also pressure. So we understand the player that's in possession, what's the pressure that they're receiving. So a lot of this is centered around, in possession. Out of possession or the defensive side of the game is something that we're working on and releasing towards the end of the year and next year. So this is taking a profile, so genuine words that a coach has said to us. I'll just read them out. So we want a striker that's, mobile, has speed, plays on the last line, gets in behind, and tests the opponent's centre-backs. Yeah. So that description, we've then taken some of the metrics that apply to that, in our opinion, like sprinting distance capacity, like peak sprint velocity capacity, which is PSV, and then runs in behind and runs in central channels. So
Mhm.
that builds our search for that profile. And if we look at the opposite, I won't read this out in as much detail, but basically a player that drops in that can sort of link the plays, composed under pressure. The profile and the data that we've used to feed that profile is more centered around movement, like coming short,
Yeah.
pulling wide and getting into the half spaces, passing to their teammates in dangerous positions and dealing with pressure. So we've removed the physical aspect, and that's just our choice for the profile. And every club has, I met a club this week, and every club has a different profile, right? They want different things from their players. And that's the beauty of this is, you start to add other forms of information in here as well, like event data, like biographical data, and you start to really get a nice profile. So if I take that to a simple bivariate, on the y-axis, we've got performance on, direct metrics. So at the top there, you can see players that are performing high on those direct profile metrics. And on the x-axis, sorry, we've got the performance. You probably can't see it too well, but the performance on the link-up style metrics. So you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, you've got players that are more of a link-up. On the bottom right, you've got the Harry Kane type, those players coming to feet. And on the y-axis, you've got the more Ollie Watkins type players, let's say.
Yeah.
So just as a final exercise, I've just chosen, again, these are random. I honestly don't have any clue who these players are, but these three are performing high on those direct metrics. So if we take these three players and we dig a little bit deeper into our off-ball run data, so we can understand at an event by event level. So in a match, there's on average we detect I think it's about 500 of these off-ball run events. At each event, we can give so much more granular detail. And for example, we can understand the average speed of that movement and in this situation, the defensive line height when that movement is initiated, or what I've called in the title here, the opportunity, the space in which you have to run into. So for just runs in behind only runs in behind, we're looking at both speed and the opportunity to kind of run into. And for these three players, we can see that they're all running, a decent speed above, let's say 20 kilometers per hour. But the line height is slightly different. Bassett, I think, is having more opportunity, let's say more space to run into, because the line height at the start of his run is higher, and the other two have slightly less. So there's not too much difference between them, but the last stage might be to look at how they look on an actual sort of pitch map. So now I've taken those runs in behind by those three players, and I'm looking at only the runs that happen above 20 kilometers per hour. Sorry, and I'm also looking at the threat. So we have a threat model which tells us whether the run is dangerous or not. And on the left, Bassett, his running style is interesting. Probably more kind of in green are the dangerous runs. So it's more kind of I guess in to out with some maybe more transitional sort of sideways running across the pitch. Davis is slightly higher in terms of the number of dangerous runs. So 68% of his runs are dangerous, a little bit more direct, still some sort of in to out movements. And then Schuler on the far right is, again, nearly 90% of his runs are dangerous. And there's no, it can be relatively simple. He's running within the width of the box like Ollie Watkins, and he's getting to the edge of the box and in the box. And therefore his runs are, more dangerous, and quite a nice exercise to see, okay, well, maybe for us, all these players are viable options, but actually now we've seen Schuler and his movements, he's a direct fit for what we want, and there's perhaps less transitional time in terms of getting him in and telling him exactly what we want. We can just say to him, okay, do what you were doing at your previous club. That's perfect for us. We can show him this. We can also we can link this back to the video as well. We can pull an XML file and you can use that in the various different softwares that are out there, tie it to video and start playing these instances out. So that there is probably like a decent sort of workflow into how you can go from physical benchmarking at a global level, combining it with a really specific kind of profile, and then going a bit deeper into some more what we call dynamic event level information. Chris, I don't know if you have any questions. I'll do my best.
That was really interesting. So yeah, thanks for that. I also didn't know any of the players, but I've just Googled Luca Schuler. So shout out to Luca Schuler. He's a very dangerous runner by the looks of things. So I don't know, people watching might know these players, but yeah, that was really interesting to see how the stages of kind of moving through the process, I suppose. So yeah, no, that was brilliant. So obviously on that kind of topic of runs, then you mentioned one of the charts there was purely runs in behind.
Yep.
Curious to ask you then, what are different types of runs? Because this was a conversation with Tom Warville we had. I don't know, is it 10 different types of runs? Is that right? And can you, I don't know if
Yeah.
you can reel them off, or what are the different types?
Yeah. Oh, I should be able to. No, for sure. So I suppose going all the way back to our main focus as a business, we want to provide the most scalable and accurate data possible, and we do that in an automated fashion. There's no one tagging anything. It's all automated, it's all modeled, and it's the same with the off-ball runs. So we can detect and classify 10 different run types. They are dropping off, which is kind of dropping off at an angle like a centre back would do. Coming short, which could be Harry Kane coming short, could be anyone on the pitch coming short to receive the ball. We have support run, which is typical of maybe like a number 6 running up to the line of the ball to receive. Running ahead of the ball is maybe like a number 8 who makes a real lung-busting run forward, but doesn't break the last line of defence. Pulling into a half space is typical of like wingers, maybe inverting, or number 10s pulling into those pockets. Pulling wide is obviously the kind of the opposite, pulling out wide. Underlap and overlap, I don't need to explain those, and runs in behind. And cross receiver runs are probably the two dangerous and probably the most obvious, running in behind or attempting to run in behind the back line. And then obviously in a crossing situation, running into the box. I think that was 10. Hopefully it was. But they're the different run types that we have. And obviously we've highlighted just one of them really in that presentation there.
Yeah, and you said, did you say that they're not tagged? This is all kind of machine, like the AI is picking those runs up basically.
Exactly, and I think it's important to reference this as well. Like the team, Paul Power is probably a well-known, well, definitely a well-known name for most people in this space. He and the team have worked extremely hard, working with clubs to help us define those runs. So we spoke to, I think, 6 or 7 clubs around the world to help understand. It's probably 2 years ago plus to understand what runs we should be detecting, what do they look like, and we fed lots of that. Essentially fed lots of runs, thousands of runs into the model to try and pick them up. So we can detect a certain run, and there are certain parameters. They need to be running a certain speed, so that's 15 kilometers per hour. So it needs to be an actual run. It needs to last for a certain period of time, which is 0.7 seconds. And they need to be a likely receiver of a pass. We're not detecting absolutely everything because there potentially could be a little bit of noise in there. You don't want to, there's lots of people moving all over the place. We want to capture the relevant bits of information, and then from that we can we can classify which runs fall into which sort of buckets, if you will. And there's obviously 10 buckets of 10 different run types. And that's, it's all automated. So that's the reason why we can scale, or we obviously scale across, 90, I think we're at 90 competitions now. 14 of those are women's competitions. So, which is a really interesting point as well, that women's side of the game growing. And we want to organically grow as well. So yeah, that's how we do that bit.
Perfect. No, I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing the slides, and thanks for explaining it so well. Like I said, I'll link a few other resources down below for people to watch as well. But that was really good. So, okay, let's go to a bit of advice. We've touched on a bit of advice right at the start, Craig, but a little bit more in terms of, obviously, people watching this may be early in their careers. Actually, there's probably 2 bits of advice actually I want to ask you about. So the first one is just kind of getting into the industry, starting out. So that's question number 1. So can you what would you say? Anything that you can point towards that people can do to better their career basically early on?
I mean, the landscape, as we said, is different, I think, these days. So it probably does pay to go through education, and we mentioned Loughborough University, and there are many others obviously as well. If you can get a degree or maybe an MSc in this discipline, it probably sets you off, and a placement through that, it probably sets you off extremely well. But for me, I think if you can put your work, whether it's data analysis, video analysis, if you can show examples of that and put it in front of people, and not everybody's going to be able to read it, not everybody's got the time, but if you can keep sort of knocking on the door a little bit, it might be through LinkedIn, it might be through direct connections with people. If you can put your work in front of somebody and it's obviously needs to be decent, then that's obviously a plus. And experience, I think experience is a big one. It might be difficult. It's quite a congested market, I'd say, these days. But if you can get some form of experience in it, it might be in a different sport. It might be, you started filming the netball. I'm just trying to think of a netball team, Manchester Thunder. Maybe I've got that wrong, but you started to film and do some analysis with that team. If you can prove and give evidence to suggest that you're able to add value and you can be relied upon, I think that speaks volumes, really. But it is difficult to come by, and I think as soon as you get the first one, it might lead on to, okay, well, you've got that bit of experience. how can we go on to the next one? And maybe somebody else will give you another chance and give you another chance. If you can combine that with the academic side of it, then I think you're in a good position. But you know, I think it is a congested space. There are lots of good people looking to get into roles within analysis. The good thing is I think there are more roles out there compared to what there was, let's say, Chris, 10 years ago or 8 years ago, whenever we started out this journey. So probably the experience one is a key one for me if you can.
Yeah. I think the point on more role, because when I see because obviously when I was at Brighton and stuff like, we didn't really do tracking data, like stuff like that, and it felt like we had so much to do then, and all the extra data now, it's a bit overwhelming. Like there's so much that you can actually analyze, and that's why we're seeing bigger departments grow out and people coming in with the skill sets of data analysts, data scientists, which those kind of roles just didn't exist back then. It was it was the first team analyst, wasn't it? Like you've got to do pre-match, you've got to do post-match, you've got to do everything, and just do what you can basically.
Yeah, I think you're right. The emergence of more analysis roles, bigger departments, connections with other departments like the coach analyst role, that's different now. Data science is huge. Just even over the last 2 or 3 years, seeing the increase in the importance placed on those roles. So there are more opportunities, and there are quite a lot of resources and a lot of courses as well that you probably can do with limited experience, and you might even come from a different background. You might come from a maths background, a physics background, and you have an interest in football, and there is a genuine option and a viable route into football. Some of the other things still apply. You've got to be hardworking, personable, you've got to be able to connect with people, and have that human element. But there are other options now. The departments are growing, and I think there's more importance. Thankfully, I think there's a lot more importance placed on all of these sort of different departments focused around video, data, and analysis. So I think that's it's trending in a really nice way. I don't think we'll get to a position where the departments are bigger than the actual football team themselves. I'm not sure how many departments will have 11 or 12 people within them, but I could be proved wrong. You never know.
Yeah, definitely. Nice. So in terms of then, in fact, that's what I forgot to ask you. So and this might be just a straight up no, but is there any SkillCorner data that is available for people to play around with outside of a club, or is that not a thing?
Do you know what? I actually don't know the answer to that. We did have some more maybe some open source data available early on. Actually, one of our key members of our team, I think one of the data analysts, initially how we got into the role was potentially via that route, looking at the data, using it and providing examples of it. I don't think we have, in all honesty, but it's a great point and something if we probably could do, because that's another thing, right? If you can get your hands on some data or scrape some data and prove that you can do some interesting analysis with it, then that's definitely going to be a big plus. But it's a good point. I'll definitely have to check that one.
Yeah, it's cool, nice. So in terms of then, I mean, it's really cool in terms of all the off the ball runs, the run types. I want to just ask you, from your opinion of someone that's within the space of tracking data, what's kind of maybe not? I'm not asking you what's coming up in the next few years, but what do you see as potential? How can we improve tracking data? How can we make it more so people are getting more insights from it? What is the maybe 5-10 years down the line?
Yeah, interesting question. I think my sort of simpler opinion on that is, first of all, is that there is a lot of growth within these clubs to onboard tracking data, because not everybody can use it yet. And if you're lucky enough to be in a club where there's a centralized official tracking data, optical tracking partner, like in the Premier League, for example, and the Championship, you can start working with the tracking data, a really, really rich data set on your own league. But if you want to then start to bring that into recruitment, which arguably, I think that probably is a long-term vision of a lot of our kind of clubs and clients that we work with. I think there's a lot of space, a lot of opportunity to do that. There are only a handful of clubs who are really getting seeing the impact of the raw tracking data. So I think there's that. I think there's probably a 2, 3, 4, 5-year journey for a lot of clubs to go on to get to that point. I think another thing that we're looking at ourselves actually is to enter that kind of tactical video space, or the wide angle space. So we can derive our information from broadcast video and scale that. We have a really good solution for that. But actually, to get more information, essentially, we are now starting to work with tactical and wide angle video to be able to see all of the players more consistently. So there's that piece as well, which can improve, or probably improve our certainly our tracking data, which everybody would want I guess everybody would want to receive, but that probably sits more within centralized within a club. For example, let's say a big club in the Premier League has video footage of all of their academy matches, wide angle, brilliant footage. If we're able to onboard that, if we're able to track that and derive information, you've now got this consistent data set, so you can now actually have a view of, physically and technically and tactically your players that are already in your system. Perhaps there are some that are good enough to get there, which is a recruitment piece in itself, right? Well, we're just going to recruit from our academy. So there's maybe a couple of bits there, but the big one I think is that, and something that we're excited about, is we've got all of this derived information, and the reason why we created game intelligence or contextual data and physical is to remove the need from our clients to derive that from the tracking data itself, because that's really hard. At some point in the future, clubs will get better at that, I think, and they'll start to do that themselves. And maybe at that point, they'll be using a lot of different data sources, and the tracking data piece will just be really specific for the really kind of niche and bespoke models that are really key to their game model, which is the secret sauce that they won't give anybody, won't tell anybody. So that's just my view, but potentially the next, couple of years, maybe 5-6 years, we might see more clubs get into that space, I think.
Interesting, nice. So again, that kind of leads back to there's more and more jobs going to come up in these clubs with when they get the grip, when they start using the data more and more clubs get on board with using that data. There will be more roles coming for these kind of positions. So one thing I do ask everyone, Craig, is a bit off topic. Any books or podcasts that you recommend? It doesn't have to be sports analysis. It can literally be anything that you want to give a shout out to that you think others might enjoy.
Yes. I am currently getting through, I'm only a few pages in, the data game, the story of Liverpool's sort of analytics department. So that's one, but I'm only a few pages in, so I'll be able to give you a better review after I finish that. I think Ian Graham's book, obviously Ian Graham was obviously part of the data and research team at Liverpool for many years. His book on how to win the Premier League, I think the title is, when I can get my hands on that, I'll be looking forward to reading that. And then this is a bit of a plug, really, a bit of a shameless plug. If you're looking for an easy read, I mentioned earlier my wife's side of the family, they've got all the good genes, the football genes, and her brother and her father played 350 plus games for Blackburn Rovers, and he's got a book, or he's got two books actually. So a shameless plug is The Smell of Football 1 and The Smell of Football 2. He's got two books, and it's just an easy read, all about his experiences within football. And if you want to laugh and you want to take it on a holiday, and you probably be able to go front to back within a couple of days. It's hard to put that one down. So probably that one as well. Nice,
perfect. Well, I'll link those down below. So is there anything else you want to give a shout out to, Craig? Anything at all before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot there. This is, look, shout out to your podcast as well. To be fair, you've had some really, really interesting guests over the course of the whole podcast. Certainly the last few weeks or so, there's been some really interesting ones, more into the sort of data analytics space. So shout out to that. I think that's certainly a growing area alongside the data analysis. So and hopefully it'll continue. I think it's been great speaking to you, Chris, and obviously sort of speaking about some of the Brighton days and stuff like that. It's a shame we didn't cross paths, but we must have just missed each other. But no, thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for your time, Craig. One final thing I'm going to ask you, Craig, actually. We mentioned the football Euro, so obviously the final's on Sunday. So, like I said, we're recording this before the final, but you sound like a genius. So I want to ask you a prediction. So what's the score going to be?
Tough one, that, innit? I'm going to annoy quite a few people. I'll go for extra time, 2-1. I suppose similar 2-1 to England. That's what my heart is wishing for.
Okay.
But Spain look good, so
Spain are quite good, aren't they? Spain are quite good.
It's tough. It's going to be tough to get that, but maybe we can make it. Maybe this is where it comes into play, right? Making it a nice boring game, frustrate them, and perhaps surprise them, or get an interesting decision here or there. But let's go for 2-1. Let's go for it's coming home, right?
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to go 2-2, and I'm going to go England on penalties. Because I don't know where that came from, but the last guest, so it was Sam Gregory. Actually, I asked him before we recorded that before the tournament started, and he said England. Okay. So he's still in it. But then when we ended the call, he did probably regret saying England, but it's quite good. So perfect, nice. So obviously, I hope England have won by the time this comes out. But Craig, thanks very much for your time. It's been really, really interesting. I'll link everything that we spoke about down below. But thanks again for your time, and I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.